Hi everyone, welcome to week 5's lecture. And this week groups 6 and 7 made a presentation about fandom, identity and activism. And group 6 showed how K-pop fandom supports creativity, skills and active learning. It's more like a personal level, individual fans, what kind of benefits they get by engaging in the fandom activities, right? And Group 7's reading and presentation focused on transnational fandom and digital fan activism. It's more like a macro level than the Group 6 presentation scope, right? And today's lecture asks, how does participation in fandom become cultural power? And where does it stop? What is the limit of it, right? So group 4's question 1 asked, if BTS's success shows Western pop standards are no longer the default, what should count as real legitimacy in global pop today? So the key patterns, like many students argue that legitimacy now comes from fan-driven participation rather than Western institutions like radio, critics, or labels, and several emphasized sustained engagement, like a streaming, social media activity, concerts, and long-term fandom as key marker of legitimacy. Again, it's fan-driven, right? The legitimacy is coming from the fan activities, based on what fans do, right? And also, some students highlighted how digital platforms shift power from gatekeepers to audiences, enabling bottom-up legitimacy. That is a quite good point. But then, how about the power of the digital platforms that they have, right? It's not only the participants, right? But then the digital platforms themselves have a lot of power also, right? And other students stressed authentic identity and consistency over time rather than Western approval as central to global success, right? So overall, you guys agree that global pop legitimacy today is defined by sustained fan engagement, digital circulation, and authentic identity rather than Western validation. And the second question, how important is language in global pop success in the streaming era? So many of you argue that full lyrical understanding is no longer essential, as emotion, performance, and visuals communicate meaning globally, which is a valid point, right? And several emphasize that identity and affect matter more than language fluency in forming emotional connections, which is again a very valid point, right? And some noted that language has not disappeared but shifted, with fans rely on translations and collaborative meaning making, like fan translations and so on, right? And others also pointed out that artists still use English strategically, but Korean identity remains central rather than erased. That is really true too, right? And overall, you guys concluded that in the streaming era, language is less a barrier and more a layer, while identity and emotional resonance drive global connection. And both discussion questions were quite good to elicit this kind of thought-provoking discussions, right? Good job, Group 4. And let's move on to Group 6, this week's first presentation. There are three arguments were the first about the relationship between identity construction and creative participation in fandom. And then second argument was through this kind of fandom activities, fans can develop certain skills, right? Technical or creative talents they can kind of nurture through this fandom activities, right? And also the last argument was about the participatory culture. Through this kind of culture, there's this shift from fans are from passive consumers to more like active producers, right? And through their engagement in the fandom activities, not only they develop their skills and certain creative talents, but also that means actually they are becoming by actively engaging in this kind of activities, they becoming like a producers themselves, right? So there is this concept called prosumers, like a producer plus consumers, right? They're not only just consumers, they're producing at the same time, right? And the connection sections were really well done. The way they group 6 organized the connection section is by argument, right? After they present their argument, they introduce the internal connection and then external connections per each argument, which works really well as well, because if the connection section is later after the argument, sometimes it is not clear one of the three which argument is connected to which reading or which external resource, right? So I think group 6 organization way, the method works quite well, because you know they're talking about argument 1 when they're talking about it's linked to other resources, right? And the external connections, the internal connections were all good, and then external connections were also very good examples. They collected the examples to support their argument, right? So those examples worked really quite well, and also very relevant and well chosen. In terms of the connection section in general, not only group 6, but I think it will be very, very helpful if you say that this argument, that whatever argument you're connecting to, and this resource is linked in what way? You just put it into the slide, right? Is A exemplified by B, or is A is pointing at the similar point, like similar, right? Highlight similar, but then or complementary, right? Or it gives some whatever link can be made conceptually, right? One can exemplify the other, one can supplement the other, or they're pointing at the same thing but in different ways. So I think these connections you have to clearly highlight it and put it into the slide. And then also I think group 6 they did well, but group 7, when also in the slide itself you put the reference, if it's internal, then put the last name of the author, and then year, and then week number. Is it from week 2 or week 1? We don't have really week 1 references, but week 2, 3, 4, right? Clearly say that week number, and then last name, and then the year in the slide, on the slide as a slide text, right? So let's move on to the discussion questions by group 6. The first discussion question is about the fandom activities, like whether it asks, have you ever been have you ever participated in this kind of fandom activities, and how that fandom kind of shape creativity, identity, and belonging, right? And then if one was involved in a different fandom, then just compare that with a K-pop fandom, how that can be different, right? So question 1 was quite good, that it can be linked to individual experiences. That's always very helpful, because we are dealing with this abstract concept, right? Very big, but it's kind of hard to grasp, right? But then when we think about these questions in terms of our personal experiences or personal level, then it's easier to understand, and it becomes more relevant to who you are and what you do, right? And the only thing is that maybe a lot of you hopefully have been active, somewhat engaged in fandom activities, then it will be easier. But if you have not been engaged in any fandom activities, it may be difficult to answer, right? But it depends on personal experiences. And question 2 was about the fan labor, right? And how that challenges the idea of they are not that serious, or they are passive consumers, right? And should fan labor count as real cultural professional work or not, right? So it's a really a good question also about, we can talk about, all these K-pop fans, their fan labor they're doing for not for getting paid, but they just do it for their own, idols, right? Out of it's totally voluntary, right? Okay, so those questions were well made. So now I want to take group 6 second question, a bit further, Group 7 asks whether fan labor should be recognized as real professional work, right? Which is a very important question. But let's think about, fan labor can be very empowering, right? As the Group 6 presented, through this fan labor, fans learn real skills, right? And, for example, translators develop language skills, and organizers learn leadership and coordination. And some fans even turn these skills into jobs or career later, right? But the reading also helps us see attention in that, right? A lot of fan labor, most of it is unpaid, and platforms like Twitter or YouTube benefit from fan activity, right? So who makes money here, right? And entertainment companies also benefit from free promotion and visibility, and the idols themselves. But fans are often working for passion, not for money. So this recognition can be double-edged. It can value fan work, but it can also normalize unpaid labor. So the reading also reminds us that fandom is not always positive. There can be conflict, bias, or exclusion inside fandom spaces. For example, fans may disagree about values, politics, or leadership, and some voices can be ignored or attacked while other voices is recognized, right? So when we analyze fandom, we should avoid two extremes. We should not see fans as mindless consumers on one hand, but also we should not romanticize fandom as perfect, right? It has its own shortcomings and limits. And returning to Group 6, their presentation shows why fandom matters. And our job in this course is to ask deeper questions about power, value, and responsibility in participatory culture. And again, building on Group 6 presentation, we saw that K-pop fandom is highly participatory, and also Group 6 presentation showed that K-pop fandom is highly participatory, right? Fan creates content, organize events, and translate materials, and they even engage in activism, right? But however, participation does not automatically means power, and Group 6 showed very well how active fans are, right? What we need to ask next is who controls the outcomes of that activity, right? Even when fans work hard, platforms decide visibility through algorithms. Companies decide which messages are amplified, and economic benefits do not always return to fans, right? And it's more like affective benefits, not money-wise, right? So participation exists, but decision-making power often stays centralized, right? And for example, fans may trend a hashtag, but whether it leads to real change depends on platform rules, corporate interest or the agency interest, and media attention, right? So here we move away from fans are active to asking who benefits from that activity, right? And this is where analysis goes beyond celebration of the fan activity or fandom, how powerful that is, how, fans are not just passive, but they're active. But then we start to examine power relations. Okay, so let's move on to Group 7. Their core argument were about first, transnational cultural power of K-pop, and second, evolution of K-pop fandom, and third, digital fan activism, right? And those arguments are clear and coherent and well aligned with the assigned reading. And just one minor comment is that the initial statement, they clearly put the statement in the first slide when introducing each argument. I think that statement can be a little bit succinct, right? Because you're going to explain the statement in following slides, right? So this it'll be a little bit better if you put the statement more short and sweet rather than with a lot of explanations in it. And the connections, the internal readings and external resources. The internal connections section on the slide, on the top, the slide header or slide title said argument 2 and argument 3, right? So maybe I think it means that that connection is made to argument 2 and that my second connection was made to argument 3. But because those slides are about the internal connection, it's better to put the title like a internal connection 1 or internal connection 2, and on the content of the slide say like, it's about argument, this link is between argument 2 and this reading, right? And how these are linked. I think that those slides can be more better organized, so to make it more clear what this is about, right? And again, the internal connection sections put the clearly put the in letters, put the author, year, and week number. And the external connection section it was a good example to choose from, right? That was a good choice, right? And but then again, if you clearly state the link between you explained, but also in the slide say, by using these keywords, exemplified or by supplementary or comparable, all these linking words that make it more easier for the audience to understand what the key point of the connection section. And discussion questions 1 about the impact of the evolution of K-pop fandom on the way K-pop artists engage with their fans and navigate socio-political issues. And the second question about how the convergence of K-pop and digital technologies transforms fan and cultural activism. So these questions are clearly connected to the presentation's core arguments, but then you don't need to really answer the questions, right? Because we're going to do that through the discussion, activities, right? The audience will do that. So instead of presenting your answers, you can provide more background for the questions, right? You don't need to do that much either, right? Because I think the background is supposed to be presented before the questions were asked, right? So, you don't need to spend a lot of time. Don't designate a lot, chunk of time in this section, right? And the questions are valid and relevant to the arguments, but, in terms of answering them, if it's very abstract and too macro, it can be a little bit difficult to answer. So maybe one of them can be, abstract and macro level question, but maybe the other question can be more, somewhat helping the audience to make it, relevant to their own, they can think of their own experiences or a more personal level. So the question itself can be a little bit less micro level, so that audience can grasp the concept easier in terms of the personal level, right? And so people moving on to my lecture portion here, both presentations, I think they did a better job making this transition, next who and so and so will talk about this, or thank you, and so by those kind of transition works, it looks like a more coherent to one presentation, and that was a really good job. And group 6 put a talking head, and group 7 put a just still photo, but talking head works better than a photo, right? If you have to choose between the two, because talking head shows more effort, right? It shows you're trying to make a presentation, right? So that, if you have a choice, I recommend you choosing the talking head, right? And group 6 made it more like making a presentation instead of just reading. I can see from the talking head, right? And one comment on both in terms of the both presentation, in terms of the sound quality. So I know you're recording it like individually and put them together. So I think having a kind of a similar level of sound quality throughout the sections will be definitely helpful. And instead of like one sound quality is kind of low and one is a little better, then it, you know, it it feels like a chopped up, right? So pay attention to the sound quality to try to make it you know, kind of even, right, throughout the sections, right? And in terms of just my add-on here, now, like, you know, continuing from the Group 7's presentation, building on Group 7's presentation, that, you know, we saw the K-pop fandom is highly participatory, right? Fans, so building on to Group 7's presentation, I just want to briefly talk about the limits of the digital fan activism, right? And cultural power is not automatically political power, right? Although this, you know, some K-pop fandom were actively involved in this, you know, political campaign. Even so, it doesn't, you know, cultural power doesn't really grant automatic political power, right? And because digital activism is very context dependent, right? And the visibility of the fandom is not the same as, you know, structural change, or it cannot really automatically lead to structural change, right, or policy change, right? And because it's very this fandom activities or fandom activism kind of it has this foundation on this emotional mobilization. It's, you know, their fan affect, right? They're like, you know, emotionally engaged in this fandom, right? So when you're emotionally engaged in something, you know, our emotions change all the time, and it doesn't really I mean, some emotions can last long, but, you know, emotional mobilization doesn't have that much of a long-term kind of stability, right, compared to other types of, like, for example, faith or religious belief, or some political beliefs, or, you know, political, how do I say, like a political, yeah, like a faith, a belief, or, you know, your political, you know, which party you support, that doesn't really change that often, right? It's like once you are in this one side, most likely you will stay in this side for the rest of your life. Although there are some people who change their political, you know, standing, right? So, but what I want to say is that this fandom, because it's more like the foundation is more their, you know, affection, or their, you know, emotional connection they have to their, you know, their idols and stuff. It has less kind of stability, and because of that, you know, emotional mobilization may not have really a long-term impact, right? And still the questions, you know, we have to ask these questions. One is activism symbolic rather than transformative, right? Is this activism is really transforming anything, or is more like a symbolic, right? Well, it can be both, but which has more kind of a ratio, right? And who defines what counts as successful activism? Again, like, you know, all these questions, who has the power to decide what's valuable, what is real, what is legit, what is, you know, standard or normal, right? That's like when we start asking this question, who has the right to do so, then we are like asking these power relationships, like who has that kind of power, right? And the key takeaway is that the K-pop fandom shows potential for cultural power, definitely, right? But also reveals limits inside commercial platforms. They are, you know, working in, you know, these platforms. Without like this kind of platforms, this K-pop fandom cannot be in this kind of size, and then you know, level of activism they have, or, you know, level of fandom activities, or even, you know, this kind of political activism, all that. So this the commercial platform is the venue or medium where all these things happening, right? So there's a the limits of the fandom activism in terms of where these fandom activities are mediated through. That's one limit, but we also talked about the more fundamental limits, right? Because it's emotional mobilization, it's hard to have for this kind of mobilization to have long-term impact, and there is no automatic political power can be granted through this fandom activism, right? So this is it for today's lecture, right? And we have this reaction video project coming, right? Although the due is beginning of March, so you have some time, and the reading week is coming, so you may decide to work during the reading week when your workload is less. But just remember, for your reaction video, it should be very spontaneous. That's the key thing. There will be two parts, right? Actually, the first part will be doing the reaction video. Second part is you're commenting on or analyzing your reaction video, right? And linking to the course material. So I think you should work in two parts. Like you do the reaction video recording first, and then the second part is analyzing. Can happen right after, but it can be, separate. Two can be separate, right? But the most important thing in the first part of, the reaction video itself, it should be spontaneous. It cannot be rehearsed, and it's not genuine reaction if you practice, right? So you have to pick a music video, all your members, none of your members watched before, to make it spontaneous. If you want to practice, do it with another music video, something else. But actual recording, do it with a totally new one to every member of your group, right? So that it can be spontaneous. And I know, me included, it's a little bit awkward to show your reaction naturally, more actively, because some are more reserved, right? But then think of this as a play. You are an actor, and you are very active, expressive, and kind of persona you are wearing only for this 5 minutes of recording of the reaction video. If you are not used to it, practice it, watching and watch a lot of reaction videos. Then you may see which ones are good, which ones are more expressive, which ones are more more fun to watch, right? If the reactor is quiet and say one word here and there, would you watch it? Do you think it will be fun to watch, right? Think about it. Watch some, interesting ones, many of those, and see how they react. And you practice maybe, watching on your own, watching some other music videos, right? And then as a group, right, you can also practice using one music video, but in the actual recording, I want to emphasize it again, pick a new one so that it will be totally new to everybody, right? And do it, right? So that's my tip to how to create the reaction video, right? Okay, so this is it for today, and thank you very much for your attention.